So, today we're going to dive into the incredible story of a guy named Doug Sparks. And wow, what a story it is. We're talking about a journey from a self-proclaimed guzzler in his rebellious youth, all the way to becoming a spiritual father for thousands across an entire continent. It's just a powerful story of transformation. So, let's get right into it.
All right, so picture this. It's the 1950s. We're in Formosa, which you know today as Taiwan. And suddenly the senior Chinese official, a head of a whole government department shows up, and he's urgently repeating this phrase over and over. He's desperate, saying he needs to meet his Shiao Jang. Now, Shiao Jang basically means principal. So you have to wonder, right? Who is this highly respected figure he's so eager to see?
Well, here he is. The esteemed principal was none other than Doug Sparks, a 23-year-old American. Yeah, you heard that right. He even joked about it later, saying, "I then decided that I had to grow a mustache and let my hair grow longer." You can kind of see why. So this really begs the question, right? How on earth did this young guy from Minnesota become the Shiao Jang, this revered father figure to so many people?
Well, to figure that out, we've got to go back, way back to the beginning, to his really unlikely start as a young man who was, believe me, heading in a completely different direction.
Yeah, because before he was a principal, his life was defined by, well, pretty much anything but spiritual leadership.
Actually, it was the total opposite.
So Doug Sparks, he joined the Navy for basically one reason: to have a good time. Simple as that. He just dove headfirst into what he called the life of wine, women, and song. He and his buddies even started a club, and get this, they called it the Guzzling Dozen. And his title in this illustrious group? Guzzler of the Deck. By his own admission, he was just completely lost. And then everything changed. He's at Treasure Island Naval Station, and a friend shares a Bible verse with him. "Except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." And for whatever reason, those words just stuck. Sparks said they hounded him day and night. He just couldn't shake them. And that one moment set him off on a search for a totally new compass in life.
And where did that new compass point him? Straight to Asia. You gotta remember, he's only 22 years old at this point. He's only been a Christian for a few years, and boom, he's sent to Formosa. And this is where the young guzzler is gonna face his first huge test and really show everyone the scale of his new ambition.
So he's reading the book of Genesis, and he's inspired by this promise God made to Abraham. So he prays this really simple, but honestly pretty audacious prayer: "Make me multiply." And he wasn't thinking small. He started praying for 100,000 people to study the Bible. Now, when he shared this goal with an older, more seasoned missionary, well, he basically got chewed out for being prideful and presumptuous. So after that, he just decided, okay, I'm going to keep this prayer to myself.
So, what was the result? Well, by the time Doug left Formosa, that Bible correspondence course he started had, wait for it, 200,000 students. That's double his already crazy goal. So yeah, I'd say he got his answer. But here's the thing about Sparks. He knew that just having big numbers wasn't enough.
He had this realization that mass evangelism, just getting people in the door, wasn't the same thing as actually making disciples. So what did he do? He developed this simple, visual, and reproducible system. He came up with the bridge to explain the gospel, the wheel to illustrate Christian growth, and the hand to help people memorize key themes. And this was a total game changer, because it gave regular people these simple, memorable tools they could actually use to teach someone else. It created a movement that could just grow on its own, organically, not just from the top down.
But for all his success, Sparks' most profound lessons about leadership, well, they wouldn't come from any of that. They were going to be forged in the fire of just unimaginable personal tragedy.
So back in 1954, while he was still in Formosa, Doug married a woman named Layla Elliott. And together, they served all over the world. Asia, Africa, Europe. They raised 4 kids and built this incredible global ministry. But their journey together, it was about to face a truly devastating trial.
Just listen to this timeline. It's just immense. In 1972, after a brutal 6-month battle, his wife Layla died of cancer. Then, 14 years later, he himself was diagnosed with the most aggressive form of prostate cancer. And just 1 year after that, his daughter Karen and her husband were killed by a drunk driver. These tragedies would, as you can imagine, profoundly shape the rest of his life and his leadership.
So you have to ask, where does someone find the strength to endure all of that? Well, the day he found out about Layla's cancer, this verse from the Psalms just came to his heart. It wasn't about denying the pain, not at all. It was about this deep trust that even in the face of the worst possible news,
he would be taken care of. And that right there became the anchor for his soul.
Then, in 1979, Doug returned to Asia, the very place where his whole journey began. But he wasn't that 23-year-old kid anymore, not by a long shot. He was now a seasoned leader, tested by fire, and he was supported by his second wife, Priscilla, who was right there with him for this next big chapter. He was ready to take on his biggest role yet.
He became the director for the Pacific Area's Navigators, or PAN for short. And just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, his territory stretched from Korea all the way down to New Zealand, and from India all the way across to Japan. It was a massive, truly continent-sized responsibility.
And he didn't just walk into this job blindly. He came in with a really clear philosophy he called three-dimensional leadership. First, there was servant leadership. That was his relationship with God. Second, shepherd leadership. That was all about people. And third, steward leadership, which was about getting the tasks done. But this wasn't just some abstract theory for him. It was a practical framework. His #1 mission was to live this out and this is crucial, to raise up national leaders who could then take over the work in their own countries. He wanted to ensure the legacy would continue long, long after he was gone.
So, when you look back, after a lifetime of incredible success, but also just profound suffering, what's the ultimate legacy of Doug Sparks? Well, it turns out his greatest strength was actually forged in his deepest pain.
I want you to listen to this. This is what he said to the drunk driver who killed his daughter. In a moment of just unimaginable anguish, he offered forgiveness. He said later that the main lesson God taught him through everything was compassion. And really, in the end, it wasn't his strategic success or the big numbers, but his compassion, a compassion born directly from his suffering that truly became his defining characteristic.
And for all of his incredible accomplishments, Sparks was still deeply human. When he reflected on his life, he offered this really poignant regret. He admitted that in his zeal to serve an entire continent, he traveled constantly, and he often didn't spend enough time with his own family. It's just a powerful and, honestly, a very humbling final thought from a man who gave so much of his life to others.
And that really leaves us with a question to think about, doesn't it? Is a legacy measured by the big stuff, the 200,000 students, the continents managed, the movements that were built? Or is it found in the quiet strength it takes to forgive, the humility to admit your regrets, the compassion that's forged in the fire? It makes you wonder, what is the true measure of a life?